Class number Faith and Count, class number 209. And we are in the summer months. And it's very interesting. The parshas parsha that we deal with in the summer, we're very practical about dealing with the world because I guess what was going on with the Jews, they very reason practical stuff. They were wandering in the wilderness, and how do you survive in a wilderness in a world that's hostile to Judaism, hostile to everything around you? How do you get you inspired? How do you get your motor running? So the next three parshas are action packed. Always got a big deal out of it. Interesting, the Rebbe always made a big deal also of last week's parsha, Bahaloscha. Almost spoke about it every single time about this one theme. And the class tonight is going to be based largely on a class that Rabbi Simon Jacobson gave to the Kollel in Crown Heights, talking about a personal experience he had with it. So the Rebbe spoke that year. It was Tavshin Nun Aleph 91, and he said the question that Rashi brings at the very beginning of the parsha, which is, it says Bahaloscha escha neiros, talking to Aaron, that when you light the menorah in the temple, you should light it up. Bahaloscha. Bahaloscha actually means to lift up or to elevate, raise up. That's not the word we use for lighting. Every Jewish mother knows lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. You should kindle the candles of Shabbos. It's not bahaloska, it's bahalitka. Why doesn't it say bahalitka? So Rashi explains, and it says because the commandment to Aaron was not just to get to start it lighting and get the menorah going, because sometimes it actually goes out. So you should light it in such a way that it stays lit. Make it so it goes up and continues to go up. That's what the commandment was being told to Aaron. And the lesson is obvious. Also, that the Rebbe emphasizes that many sichas and memorim, that this is the way we deal with other people and with ourselves. That you can't just inspire them one time. You have to make sure that they get it, that they catch fire, and that they start illuminating other people. That's what a teacher is. That's what in any kind of relationship, whether it's in with you with your children, with you with friends, with you with parents, with you with students, with anybody, with anything, and with yourself. You can't just read a book and then say, I was inspired, because you know what? It disappears. So you have to make sure that it stays continuously going. That's the real test. That's the acid test, is what they say in English, right? You have to make the person, self-actualize, and not just getting the point, but you have to go and you have to eliminate other people. And that's a big lesson. It's not just a lesson of the parsha. It's a lesson in life, and everything we do. However, Simon continued, and he said, we had a lot of questions on this parsha because the Rebbe raised a lot of questions, and he made it sort of complicated for us, and we were trying to understand. They wrote in to the Rebbe and said, we don't understand. Yeah, you said this, but then you pointed out the fact is that the menorah didn't go by itself. Aaron lit it. So it's not like it's a self-kindling menorah. Somebody has to do something. And the same thing with everything else in life. There's free will. And, you have to, people get, even the free will is given to them by God. So everything is really, every energy that's given to a person is ultimately, it means somebody has to come and start you. So who's doing the activity? To hammer this home a little bit more, I mean, that's, in the Chassidus, we definitely emphasize that, even though we're supposed to work with our own powers, with koach atzmi, with our own efforts and our own initiative and our own work, nevertheless, everybody knows that it's the Rebbe who's giving us our power. So is it the Rebbe or is it us? I mean, is he giving us the insight, the intuition, the understanding, or is it us? Are we the ones who are doing it? As Gershon Jacobson, Simon's father, once asked the Rebbe, he said, it was a story. It was some town, and it was sort of embarrassing. The Chabad communities were all fighting with each other, and no, I'm just gonna pin myself. Nope. I don't know what happened here, what I did, but I did something. Okay. And anyway, and they were fighting. And he asked the Rebbe, he said, why don't you do something about it? It's sort of like an embarrassment to Chabad. You know what's going on in this town. And the Rebbe said two things. He said, A, it won't help because everybody will interpret it their own way. B, it sort of goes against the whole point. The whole point of Chassidus is for the person to be able to do something on their own. So when they wrote in the questions to the Rebbe revised the Sicha, but he also wrote something very unusual on the side. He wrote a message back and he said, you're asking me all these questions. The whole point of the whole talk was that you're supposed to do it with your own power. So why are you asking me these questions? Someone said, I didn't know what to do. I mean, the Rebbe never answered me this way before. And he asked Joel Kahn, and he said, I never saw this kind of an answer before. I mean, how are we supposed to answer this? We don't understand it. So what do you mean? So he said, I've always wondered what this meant. And so he's been thinking about it for, I guess, a number of years. And then he came up with an explanation, which is from a story. And he says, it goes as follows. So it was there is a letter from the Rebbe from the very early years when the Rebbe was just before the Rebbe was actually the Rebbe, in the year between the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Rebbe. And there were Hasidim who wanted a leader. And they were asking the Rebbe, please lead us, tell us what to do. Tell us what to do. There's no who you're in charge. You're the only logical candidate. So the Rebbe wrote back to them and he said, here's what I'm suggesting.
What's going on? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, as just a sideline here. So, I mean, he said an interesting line. It came also from another Jacobson, not related, who was a Yisrael Jacobson, who was from the early 1900s, the beginnings of Chabad. He once said the following, that the Rebbe Marash used to give commands. This is a statement from the Frierdiker Rebbe. My father, that's my grandfather. My father, the Rebbe Rashab, used to give suggestions. Used to ask requests from people. He says, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I give suggestions. Yisrael Jacobson said, and the Rebbe's approach was always, he doesn't even give suggestions. What he waits is until you come up with your own idea, and then he helps you. You come in, you come up with an idea, and then he helps you refine it. So the Rebbe always wanted people to light up themselves. He didn't tell them what to do. Okay. So the Rebbe told these people, he said, listen, what you should do is you should have it for bringing. Somebody should say over a mimer, and you'll be able to figure it out what the right answer to do is, just like the story with Aaron Berlinsky. Okay. Hold that thought for a sec. The story of Aaron Berlinsky is going to be the core of this talk today. For the timeline. This, if you haven't got lost yet, which I hope I haven't made you lost. It was the year 1993, Tavshin Nun Gimel. This was the year after the stroke, but before Gimel Tammuz. And Chabad was in a lot of consternation. They didn't know what exactly was going to happen. There was you could get answers, but there wasn't the kind of leadership that they were expecting from the Rebbe. And it came, the Kinus Shluchim in November, and all the Shluchim from all over the world came to Crown Heights, and they were looking for, suggestions from each other on how we should approach this time. So Simon says he was at a large gathering of all the rabbis from all over the world on the second floor of Olei Torah, and there were three speakers on a panel. There was Emmanuel Shochet, who is no longer in this world. There was Shmuley Boteach, and there was himself. And the first speaker was Rabbi Emmanuel Shochet. And he got up and he said something And Simon says, and I'm not trying to bash him because he's in the world of truth, but his approach is an approach that I need to answer here. And so anyway, you'll hear why. He got up and he said,
Who
listen,
got up?
Manuel Shochet,
Okay.
and he said the following. He said, you know, a fellow Chassid, shluchim, rabbis and so forth, the message of this situation is as follows. It's time for us to grow up. We had the Rebbe was leading us like children. He was telling us what to do, and now we have to basically come up with, we have to figure things out for ourselves, and that is the new situation, and that's what the Rebbe prepared us for. And this message was not well received. It's not, we're not the people who just go off and do things on our own, and because we have a leader, we have a Rebbe. And so people were passing notes to Simon Jacobs and said, you have to get up and you have to rebut him. You have to say something different. You have to knock him down, because this is all right. So people will always give you advice. So, but Simon said he didn't feel that his job was to knock anybody down, but he got up and he told the following, the story of Aaron Berliner. What was the story of Aaron Berliner?
Can I just interrupt you and ask you,
what?
After the Rebbe had a stroke, he couldn't respond because he had the stroke, and that's why he couldn't respond?
Yeah, he couldn't respond.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Yeses and no's.
He nodded his head this way or that, yeah. But you had to really couch your questions in a yes/no kind of situation.
And he wouldn't write down answers.
People got crystal clear brachas from the Rebbe during that time.
No, in terms of he's talking about that they couldn't get an answer from him. He wouldn't write down answers, or he couldn't write down.
At a certain point, the Rebbe was so ill that you couldn't get a response at a certain
Okay.
point.
Yeah, because he's telling the story that the Rebbe couldn't answer, so that's I wanted to clarify the. Okay, sorry.
Story. So I hope I lost already one. It got a little complicated. So anyway, the story is as follows. So this goes back to the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. The third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, was very involved. Was the mid of the 1840s or so forth. At that time in Russia, the situation was very bad for the Jews. There were a lot of pogroms. There was a beginning of the Enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, and so forth. Jews were leaving Yiddishkeit. There were decrees against the Jews that they had to go into the Russian army, and they were being forced into it to be Cantonists. And he would spend he was 1840s, 1830s, and so forth. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was often going to the capital in Petersburg to argue with the ministers and with the Tsar and so forth, the case of the Jews. One time there was an important meeting in Petersburg, and he couldn't go. So he sent a chassid of his, whose name was Aaron Berlinsky. And he called him into his office and he told him, I need you to go because I can't go. And the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, the Meber Marash, was listening to the conversation there in the room. And Aaron Berlinsky was a big scholar and very connected to the Tzemach Tzedek. And he said to the Tzemach Tzedek, he said, but what if I don't know what to do? I mean, what if I get stuck somewhere? There's no WhatsApp, there's no telegrams, how am I going to answer the situation here? So the Tzemach Tzedek said that you'll have to just use your own knowledge, your own das, your own understanding. The Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek's son, heard this, and he didn't think that was such a great, he couldn't say anything against his father, but he didn't like this idea of somebody, thinking that he's so big that he can answer just as good as the Tzemach Tzedek on his own knowledge. Anyway, time went by. It was a few weeks later. The guy went to Petersburg, and it was one time, it was at a meal, and the Tzemach Tzedek, in the middle of the meal, stopped eating, and he said that the Reb Aaron is right now, he's very fermater. He's very very confused. He's not sure what to do. He's very troubled. He was sensing what was going on thousands of miles away in Petersburg. The Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek was in Lubavitch, a big distance away. And then after a few minutes, he smiled and he said, he had machavened what I wanted him to do. he figured out exactly what I would have said in that situation. And the Rebbe Marash was listening, and he realized this is very interesting, and so forth. At first, I thought the guy was such a big shot, and now I see that he's so connected and tied and aligned to what the Tzemach Tzedek wanted him to do, that he was able to come up with the same idea as the Tzemach Tzedek. And this is the core of our class in the lesson. This is it. This is really the source of really of everything in a lot of things in Judaism, a basic principle. And that is, it's one thing to be told and to be treated like a child and be a robot and told what to do and do this and do this. And the Torah, there's lots of rules, and you have to do this and you have to go there. And this is the right thing to do and this is the not. But you know what? It's much more powerful than being, it's more, you get more done when you're told what to do. But on the other hand, the bang for the buck, when you have to work it out yourself, when you're set in a difficult situation, when you have to come up with you're going crazy because you don't know what the steps are going forward or back, and you really have to sit down and ask other people and discuss it and work it out yourself and so forth, then God is there. He helps you. He helps you figure out the right answer, but you started the situation. You put the initiative in. You put the work in. And you know what? The lesson and the result and the power of what you did is much greater than anything else. It's much more effective and more transformative in the world when we have to actually work out and get out of our own pickles, if that wanted. We have to get out of that situation ourselves. It's hard. It's difficult. But if you do a lot of learning, and that's what this Aaron Belinsky did, and you align yourself very closely and you understand how the Rebbe did, not just what he writes, but you can connect to the methodology, to how the Rebbe approaches and looks at the world, and how he looks at how we deal with difficult situations, anti-Semitism, how do we deal with conflict and so forth. The more you learn, the more you spend time learning, and the more you be able to internalize this perspective, that's where things really are. And all of Torah is really that way. I mean, even in the laws of the legal laws in Judaism work that way. We weren't told whether we're allowed to listen to a shofar or a Megillah by the radio. We weren't told that. But rabbis looked into it, and many of them said, "Oh, it's okay." And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, "No, it's not okay, because there's a law that you're not allowed to listen to a shofar played in a closet or in a cave, because you'll hear the echo. And if you're so you're not really hearing the sound of the shofar. But in the case of electricity, you're definitely not hearing the original sound of the shofar. You're just hearing the reproduction of it. So he said it's completely absurd. So this is really the core of Jewish thought, of Jewish halacha and Jewish thinking, is being able to internalize yourself and to align yourself and to understand, what is it that God really wants of human beings, and what does he want of us, and what does he want in terms of his mitzvahs. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of humility, and it takes a lot of understanding. But when we work through it ourselves, it really comes out much more powerful. And with the last story then that I heard Rabbi Simon Jacobson say, he said, one time a guy came to him and he said, I'm over 30 years old. I'm not finding a girl. And you know what? It must be that there must be some sort of divine curse on me. And God hates me. And this is the reason why I'm not able to get married. And Simon said to him, "So what do you want me to do about it? I don't remove curses. I don't know of anything about, that kind of mystical kind of stuff." And so he said, "Well, I thought you knew a lot what the Rebbe said." He says, "Okay, I'll show you what the Rebbe says." He opened up a sefer, a letter to a girl, to a father of a girl, and the girl was beginning to, I don't know, she was less interested in Judaism and getting involved with all sorts of other things. And the Rebbe, so the guy wrote in and he said, "I think my daughter is inhabited by a Dybbuk." And the Rebbe said, "Oh no, that's not the situation." He says, the Rebbe never looked for the mystical, spiritual, easy way out that there's the problem. He said, "You know what? It's probably because she got involved with somebody, with friends that are not healthy or something like that. You got to work out it yourself." And that was the same answer that Simon gave to this guy. He said, there's not a mystical reason why. You know what? You have to sit down and you have to work with yourself and you have to figure out what are you doing that's actually making it difficult for you to get married. So with that, I think it's an important lesson, and I think it's a worthwhile lesson for the start of the summer and the season is you know what? We do have the power. We can get through all this anti-Semitism. We can get through all of this stuff. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of crying, and there's a lot of tears. But it's really the reason why the soul came down in this world. It's not just necessarily to get it handed as a spoon, but it's really why we're here. And you know what? God is definitely going to help us. He'll help us. We put our little effort in, and He opens up gates for us, and He opens up passages for us. And it's really more inspiring than being able to just get out of the situation without it, because we did it. We worked on it. We deserved it. And with that, I will turn over the microphone. How do you like that? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see something. Okay, 1 second. That's the other glasses.
I hope your husband realized why I had to interrupt.
Oh, you had to interrupt? Okay.
The whole point of what he was saying was that it got to the point that they couldn't ask the Rebbe anymore. He had a
Yes.
stroke and they couldn't ask him.
Question.
So I wanted to clarify.
That people that we know, you and I, sorry, they got amazing answers from the Rebbe even during the time of the stroke. The Rebbe nodded his head yes or nodded his head no, and they had amazing rescues with a nod of the head.
No, because the whole point of what
The
he was
stories
saying was
Yeah.
it gets to the point where you can't ask
Yes.
the Rebbe and you
Yes.
have to figure it on your own. So I thought
Yes.
that was the end of asking the Rebbe stuff, because that's what it sounded like.
And even today, the Rebbe works through people, like Rebbe works through people, and
But you hear what I'm saying, right? You
yes,
understand?
yes, I do.
You sort of made it sound like you couldn't get anything from him anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so anybody have anything else to say?
I should
I'm
mute
just gonna tell
myself.
you- Okay, I'm going to start with my 4 things, and then I'm going to tell you something about something I feel is a truth that I've won through the past few months, and I want to share it with you. So anyway, I'm going to go through the 4 things that we say. 4 things is that, number 1, we are in an extraordinary time. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was never wrong about any public pronouncement, told us that we are in the unfolding of the redemption. And number 2, our souls were handpicked to be at this juncture of human history because we're important, because we each play an important role in this in this most momentous chapter of Jewish life, Jewish history. Number 3, we have the tools we need in order to accomplish our missions. We have the Torah, without which you cannot accomplish your mission. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we have the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And mitzvahs are totally transformative of the human being. Mitzvahs make a person who they truly are. I've said it before, but when I started keeping mitzvahs in Key West, Florida, I stood on my porch and I would sing to Hashem, "You make me feel like a natural woman." I felt like myself for the first time in life. And I have to say that I had a very fun life. I had a very full life. I had a very successful life. But even so, it can't compare to what mitzvahs brought out of me. And while I'm talking about mitzvahs, I'm going to add one more thing. The negative mitzvahs are more powerful than the positive mitzvahs. When you take on negative mitzvahs, like the do nots, they're the last thing anybody wants to take on. People say, "Oh, I'll light Shabbos candles. It's so beautiful." But the stuff that restricts me, no, I'm not interested. But after taking on the stuff that restricts us, I felt that I got much more mileage out of those things than out of the positive mitzvahs. I got mileage out of the positive mitzvahs, of course, but I felt, and for years I felt this way. And only in the past several years did I learn that indeed the negative mitzvahs come from a higher source than the positive mitzvahs. So it makes sense that they have this huge, huge, they generate a huge amount of power. And finally, oh, I have water, thank God. And finally, what we're doing here tonight actively advances the redemption. Rebbe said the fastest way to speed up the redemption is to learn about it. I have a little bit of a scratchy voice. Okay, nothing I can do about it. So here's what I want to tell you. This year was probably my 21st year teaching at Shayla House, a Chabad school in Boston. And I never dreamed I would be a teacher, never planned on it, didn't train for it. And I'm extremely grateful in how my life history has played out. I'm extremely grateful that somebody suggested that I be a teacher of little kids, because it's been wonderful for me. I love it, basically. And this year, whatever, I taught fourth grade, then I taught first grade for about 3 years, and then I taught kindergarten for 14 years, and now I'm back in first grade. I love first grade. And this year, I believe, I don't remember the early years, but this year that just elapsed felt like the hardest year I ever had. And I felt like I was not succeeding in certain ways. I can even pinpoint the time between Purim and Pesach. I was having a very difficult time, and I'm not used to having a difficult time in the classroom. I'm used to being in control and the kids loving what's going on. And between Purim and Pesach, I had a hard time with classroom management. Now, it's true, I had 2 kids who I never had before, and who were quite challenging, and did things that I never saw before. But in previous years, I also had kids that were very challenging, very, very challenging, and other teachers couldn't challenge them, couldn't work with them, and I managed to work with them. But these kids was very hard for me. And then I don't know how it was. I don't know how I got this insight. I talked to a master teacher for a brief while, and she suggested I do 2 little things, one with one child and the other with the other child. And the essential thing in both is that I would show the child their own greatness. I needed to show each of these children their own greatness, and I needed to do it in a loving way, and they would be more cooperative after that. And I started, not only these kids, I started showering the whole class with more love. And lo and behold, the class shaped up quite a bit. And the end of the year was the last months were much better than Purim and Pesach. So what was it about Purim and Pesach? Why? I think that Hashem was teaching me something. Just like children will not perform unless they feel that you love them, you will not get the best out of those children. It's true. Some teachers can get good performance out of total fear, like they're in control of their class and nobody dares answer them. Nobody dares raise up, get out of line even by the slightest bit. But I'm not that kind of person, and I don't have that personality. So for my personality, I tried becoming very severe and very strict because I didn't know what to do with these kids. It did not work. So for my personality, I had to bring back love of these kids. I had to express a lot of love to them. And then they were calmer, they were able to sit, and they were able to listen to a much greater extent. So I'm always studying human beings. I'm studying life, and I feel it's the same thing with myself. That for years, I have my own personal challenges. We all have our own personal challenges. Some people have challenges, and I have trouble getting to bed on time. And for a teacher, it's halacha. You must be in bed early. So, and why do I have trouble? Because I'm always doing a million things, and each thing I want to do in the best possible way. So they take up more time than I allotted. And then the next thing takes up more time than I allotted. And this has been going on for years and years and years. So how do I discipline myself successfully? I've come up with at least probably 75 different self-discipline systems. I'm not joking. Maybe it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I've come up with so many systems, and I forget them in a few weeks. But the thing that is not a system is to do something, to do it with love for myself, not just discipline, to express love to myself, to do things that are genuinely loving. And when I say genuinely loving, I don't mean running out and buying myself a diamond bracelet or something like that. I mean expressing love to myself by giving myself encouragement, giving myself healthy food, giving myself and giving myself bedtime, recognizing that bedtime is loving. And when I add love to myself, when I direct more love to myself in the ways that are meaningful to me, in the ways that feel like love to me, like like this one is taking care of me, because in the end, this one has to take care of me. Of course, God takes care of us, but we're our own custodian. God can't put me to bed before I put myself to bed. And God can't give me good food unless I make it. And so, anyway, the more loving of a custodian I am for myself, the more discipline I can squeeze out of myself. So, anyway, it's a potent lesson for me. And I was going to tell a story, but but I'm not going to do it. Instead, I'm going to open up. I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to open up for a conversation and sharing ideas about this. Okay, so I'm turning off the recording.